Okay, it is 11:34 on January 9th, 2023. We're going to call the RCDC meeting to order. We'll do a quick roll call. Emily Doran here.
Brian Ryder here.
Pat Sheehan here.
Colin Harvey here.
And
Barry
just
Del
walked in the
Cambry
door.
is walking in right now. You're good. Okie dokie. So we're going to start with any public comment here in person or online. Do we have anyone here for public comment? Online? No? Okay. We will move to the consent agenda, which
You
is...
wanna do the, oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
excuse me.
it's okay. Discussion and possible action on the minutes from the December 12th, 2022 RCDC meeting.
I would
Brian?
like the minutes to show, which they do in item 3, that Colin and I were actually here, but we're not shown as being present.
Oh.
But we're shown as having moved and seconded things. So,
You are ghosts.
We can make those reflect that.
They will make those...
On item 3, it says Colin Harvey and Brian Ryder joined the meeting at this time.
But put them up in the, I guess, the present members,
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll add that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brian. So is that a motion after that change to approve? Or do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second.
Brian first, Pat second. We have it all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll get now to the regular agenda, which is the workshop and discussion with the retail coach. So Aaron Farmer, take it away.
All right. Well, glad to be here. Excited to be here today. Put together a short presentation for you. There we go. Perfect. What I wanted to do is just really talk about kind of where we've been, where we're at now, where we're going from this standpoint. So I'll jump into this. I would say if it's okay to y'all, if you have questions, just ask me as I go, and I'll answer those, and I'll also try to leave some time at the end too. But real quick, just to give you an understanding of really where things are, where things stand, just timeline. Current partnership started back in February of this last year. Feel like it's been a good partnership. Feel like it's been really good about getting the word out there about Rollingwood and talking to potential prospects. We have a lot of interest, which is good. But the problem is, where do we put them? And that's really what we spent the last 11 months or so, is building relationships with property owners, building relationships with shopping center owners, so that is there an opportunity to turn a property, to redevelop it? Is there an opportunity when something comes available to get one of these prospects in there? So we'll talk more about that. But we completed a 2022 market analysis. We'll look at some of those numbers here in a second. We identified some prospects, both retailers, restaurants, developers, and also redevelopers. We did recruitment, so we did outreach. And then site identification and just overall site opportunity awareness. What's available now? What could be available? Let's say it's 3 years, 5 years down the road. So just as a recap for everybody, retail market analysis, we did the cell phone analysis on a number of different properties, number of different stores, restaurants, retailers here in the community. We want to see where you're pulling people from. That's the key. If we're going to go out and try to recruit prospects, try to bring in some new prospects, we've got to know what that is. So example here, shops at Mira Vista, million visits per year and you're still averaging about 1 million visits per year. That's a lot of people that are coming to shop and eat in the community. We also, this is another way to look at it, this is where those customers were coming from. And then determine the trade area. So over 115,000 people that are shopping, eating here on a regular basis. If we had other retail, other restaurants here, I think we could even pull a larger base. But with what we're working with right now, what prospect or what you have in the market, this is what we're looking at. So the next thing we took a look at, and this is new, you haven't seen this yet. We partner with CoStar, which if you know anything about real estate or commercial real estate, CoStar, they keep track of property values, they keep track of rental rates, they keep track of the markets. What the absorption rates are, what the vacancy rates are. They look at all of that. So
CoStar lumps Rollingwood into the Southwest submarket for this region. So that includes Westlake Hills. That includes out towards BK and Bee Cave and Lakeway. So that is the market they consider here. We also look towards more of the central Austin submarket as well to compare those. But just to give you an idea here, just what the market rates are looking at towards the bottom here, you'll see market rents per square foot. For the submarket, they average about $34, and this is for retail that we're looking at, retail and commercial. That's obviously higher than the market, which is at 28. You can see the vacancy rate is low, 2.7%. That's decreasing. You can see the availability rate, available square footage, months on the market for properties. So you can see all of that, but I thought y'all would like to see these. These numbers are really kind of hot off the press. You can see what the inventory looks like as well for this Southwest retail submarket we're talking about here. Average building square footage, existing buildings in this market we're looking at here, and then you can see sales, and you can see what that market sales price was. So market sales price is $372 a foot. Again, bigger, larger than the market there. Average sales price is $5.6 million. These numbers continue to trend up just as everything is happening with numbers trending up here in the market. So these are kind of new, but I wanted y'all to see what these numbers looked like. But again, that was the first part of this, completing the market analysis, really getting an understanding of who that consumer is. We then looked at, retail recruitment strategy. You know, how do we bring in new tenants? We heard from a number of citizens in the market. We heard from the board, hey, we'd like to see some more retail. We'd like to see some more restaurants. How do we do that? So we identified a number of matches. This is just a handful of them on here, but some higher end retailers, some higher end restaurants because of the incomes that you serve here in the community and in the trade area. So through this list, we identified this list. Initially, we had interest from Hop Dottie, Via 313, and also Snooze. So those three restaurants were interested. Since we've had a number of brokers reach out to us and say, how do we get into this market? How do we get here? You know, there's not sites available. There's nothing really available. So we'll talk about how we get over that here in the future. But these are just some examples of who was interested. And then we've really tried to build on relationships with brokers. So the greater Austin market, when it comes to retail, is driven by the brokerage community. So typically a broker will represent multiple retailers, multiple restaurants, and they're the ones tasked at go find us sites. So we've been in touch with all of the big brokerage companies in the greater Austin area. So if it's JLL, which is right down the road here, if it's CBRE, we want them to know what's available here. And I can't tell you, just about every week I get 3 or 4 calls from brokers, retailers, site selectors that say, how do we help us get into this market? We want to be here. We're on the waiting list at shops at Mira Vista. We're on the waiting list here. How do we get into this market? So building the relationships with the brokers is good. And I feel like we've done that for sure over the last 12 months. There's this awareness of Rollingwood that from these brokers, from these retailers and restaurants, that awareness has just increased. We also attended and represented Rollingwood at some of the major trade shows, retail industry trade shows. So this would be the ICSC conference that took place in May of this last year in Las Vegas, largest retail real estate conference in the world. We also attended ICSC Red River, which happened in March of last year. We're going to be attending that same conference next week in Dallas and representing Rollingwood. And then also Retail Live in Austin that took place in September of this last year. So that's really what's been happening. But identifying let me say this. So I feel like we've done a really good job of getting retailers, restaurants, brokers aware of the market. But what Emily, what you, Colin, what we talked about is figuring out, how do we take that next step? How do we get these prospects to this market, figure out sites there? So before we do that, let's talk about identifying development and redevelopment opportunities. So if you'll remember through the process we went through 2-3 years ago, we looked at the zoning throughout the market or throughout this community and were they the right zoning designations in our opinion? And we made some recommendations on that.
So we made those changes, but through that, we also looked at every property individually. So whether it was the gas station here on the corner or it was the hospital site, we looked at every site to determine is it serving its highest and best use, and what is that best use going forward. So in doing that, I just wanted to touch on a few things. This is what's available in the market as of 7 a.m. this morning. So Rolling Wood Plaza, that property has some square footage available. So they've got about 2,800 square feet available. Total, it's about 22,000 square feet. Most of their tenants, or a lot of their tenants, are on year-to-year leases, or really month-to-month leases. The reason for that, and what the developer has told me, or the property owner has told me, if there's an opportunity to bring in a higher caliber retailer, higher caliber restaurant, if there's an opportunity to, get somebody bigger in there that's going to have more of a draw, they want to be able to do that. So they love their tenants they have in there, but they feel like they have to watch out for their own best interest at the same time, especially with the rising cost and everything throughout the market. They've got to be looking to bring that in. So just estimated rent for that shopping center is $36 to $44 a foot. A lot of information you can see on there that we included there, when it sold last, what it sold for. Also, but that's about it from a retail standpoint, or retail shopping center that has space available right now.
Aaron, real quick.
Yeah.
Your summary key of the 3 of 5 stars. What's the scale? How should we interpret that?
Oh, at the top there.
Yeah.
So that's that comes from previous tenants. People trying to deal with that market. They can deal with a certain shopping center. They can go in there and basically mark how easy it is to get in that shopping center, how responsive they are. It's basically a ranking system based on people trying to make deals with that shopping center. So so I wouldn't call that a 3-star shopping center by any means.
I just didn't know.
No, that's good. But that's how they do that. But there's some information in there, like leasing highlights, what space is available. I mean, there's 2 spaces that are just ready to go right now. A 1,900 square foot space and a 975 square foot space. But again, they could accommodate others quickly. But that's about it.
Hey, Aaron,
What
real quick.
was there? What were the tenants that were in those spaces?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head. We have that's in this report we have here. I can pull that for you. I don't know off the top of my head, to be honest with you though.
Could you make that a little bigger? Like, go to like 80% or something?
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to go back to something else that already failed at the same time.
I think it was like a Pilates studio. It wasn't
Yeah.
an actual like restaurant.
My eyes are failing
So,
me today.
Aaron, have you had conversations with, and the answer could be no, of say those 2 spaces, we were to knock down walls and make improvements and help them? Is that an option to consider?
Yeah, so the developer or the owner of that property is willing to make changes to this property.
Okay.
So in fact, he bought this as an investment back in 2016 as an investment property, not to use it as it is now, but to with plans to do more.
Got it.
So they are willing to make those changes.
Hey, Aaron, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I know you said they're looking for they'd be willing to do something longer term with a major tenant who's
Sure.
willing to put some things. So do they have, I know you mentioned like Via 313 and
Sure.
Hop Dottie and people like that caliber. A couple questions I have about that center is, do you think that is a landlord that would be open to doing something kind of more collaborative with a potential tenant who's willing to spend some money on tenant finish out
I do.
for a longer deal? And that's number one. And then number 2, with Chinatown being in there kind of as more
Sure.
or less the de facto anchor of that center,
Yep.
are there other opportunities there for another restaurant, or is it leaning more retail? Because
No,
of these restrictions?
they are actively looking for another restaurant. Chinatown does really well. They're always busy. Every time I've been there, they're always busy. But they are looking for another restaurant. Problem with that shopping center in the past has been the parking, and especially at certain times of the day. So that's something that's going to have to be really evaluated to see, depending on who the restaurant is. How many parking spots are they going to need, and those sort of things. But we have. those 3 restaurants have looked at this
Oh, they've looked at that.
development. I mean, it needs a facade enhancement.
Sure.
To be completely
Absolutely.
honest with you, to be appealing to those restaurants. However, that developer says he's willing to spend some money to make that happen. So I think there's an opportunity there, or there's definitely an opportunity for redevelopment. I mean, that's one of the first things you see as you come into town on the right there. So I think there definitely is some opportunity with that. But as far as like taking down walls and doing those sort of things, developer is willing to do that, which is good.
You may make
It
it
might
smaller.
not zero anymore.
So just scale it up.
Yeah, you can scroll that way or.
So
Sorry, my eyes were failing me.
Just stand closer to it.
Can you get me closer?
do you see, is that, okay. So really from a retail standpoint, that is the only shopping center that is traditional retail restaurant that has any available space. So on the way here this morning, I talked to Brian Dabbs, which is the real estate, the broker for Shops at Mira Vista. And I said, I know I call you all the time, but anything available, anything coming up from an availability standpoint? He said, absolutely not. He was like, he's like, every tenant that we have right now is looking to do long-term leases. So he said, hey, if you have somebody, send them over to me because there might be an opportunity we're not aware of, that could come available. But because of that first one we looked at, Rollingwood Plaza, is your only real traditional retail, restaurant center that's available right now. 3103 B Caves Road, Center 1 is another, just example of some availability here. They have anywhere from 1,700 to 16,000 square feet available. Again, not a traditional retail center, if you will, especially with it being 2 stories. But there is an opportunity, I think, here to maybe make some changes to this development to turn it into more of a retail opportunity. The property owner on that developer I've been in touch with, and they're willing to make some changes as well, which is positive. Do y'all know the site we're talking about here? Okay.
Aaron, I mean, when you've talked to these individuals and groups, and you know they're willing to make changes, they're willing to make facade changes. I mean, there's not much from a RCDC standpoint that we can truly do to nudge them. Like this is where you've talked earlier about kind of where can we go. I mean, y'all have made recommendations from changes to different zoning and things. I mean, there's, I guess from an engagement standpoint, what y'all have done so far, and just thinking more next phase. I mean, we're locked in, I think, from a development standpoint based off our zoning rules, but also even probably more so what these guys are willing to do.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what do we, I mean,
so at the
I'm
end
having
of
trouble, I'm honestly just trying to understand like what is our next step?
Yeah, so at the end of this presentation, I have 2 slides that talk about really from our perspective what we think the next steps are. So let's
Okay.
we'll get to those shortly if that's okay with you. I think if it doesn't answer your question, tell me, but I think
Okay.
it will to some extent. Another one, 2714 B Caves, you recognize that. More, it's really an office building, or medical office building, 600 square feet available. And then I think 1 or 2 others here. BK Woods, Center 3, anywhere from 500 to 6,200 square feet available, but again, not a retail center. So, as far as next steps go, let me just bring it real quick. One other 3,000 square feet available. All right, so recommendations. So based off of that, based off of the market analysis, the conversations we've been having with property owners, one thing that's going to be key in this market is going to be about timing. So properties are going to become available, I would say, in the next 12 months or so, but it's going to be about timing. There are, I can see saved searches on this market, and there are literally hundreds of saved searches on this market. So as soon as anything comes available, 100 people are getting emails out to them saying, hey, this came available. So it's all going to be about timing here. One of the recommendations I had is consider starting a rolling wood commercial exchange that would meet regularly, maybe quarterly meetings. This would be properties, owners, shopping center owners, brokers, potential developers, some of these prospects, some of these brokers that we're talking about that have interest, bringing everybody together and talking about the need for redevelopment, the need for new development here. And the hope would be building relationships with these property owners so that instead of them just listing their property, they come to RCDC first and say, look, this is, or they come to the city, they come to Ashley first and say, this is what we're trying to do. You know, we wanted to see if you have interest in this, or you have a broker or developer that's interested, so that we have, you know, so we're able to do that. So that's one recommendation that's worked well for us. We talked about this about 3 years ago, and COVID hit and everything just kind of went on hold. But I think looking at doing something like this, even if it's not quarterly, maybe it's twice a year, at least you're bringing the parties together to make that happen. That's one recommendation. Another opportunity or recommendation would be to consider developing a fund. Now, this could be a public fund, it could be a private, or it could be a P3 partnership, public-private partnership, with a focus of buying up properties in Rollingwood. When they're available, even if they're not available, or maybe going to talk to these property owners and say, hey, we've got a group of investors that's looking to buy up property in Rollingwood to change the use. Maybe not just change the use, but just up the level of tenants there. We've seen that work really well. You see that a lot in Texas right now. I don't know by statute if RCDC could do this, but we see that where cities will buy up a property, wanting to maybe have a little bit more control on what could happen there. That would be a recommendation, especially in y'all's case. Just with properties not becoming available fairly often, I think that could be key. Right now, one of the things that we're seeing in the market is you've got, I don't want to call them absentee owners, but you've got owners that are from out of state. Okay, so I just this weekend I was just looking up some different things on here. You know, owners from California, owners from Dallas, owners from just really all over. Many of them, I can guess, don't look at their shopping centers often, or don't look at their properties often. I would guess, based on looking at some of who owns these properties, some of them probably don't even know they own property here, to be completely honest with you, or they might look at it once a year, once every 5 years.
Hey, Aaron, could you, like, using maybe an example, like what does it take to kind of go from nothing to scaling it? What's another example in Texas, like you said, a community doing this? What's the, you know, what kind of dollars we're talking about? How long does it take to get something like that to be, you know, impactful?
Yeah, that's a good question. Instead of answering that today, I should probably just put some examples together for you,
think that'd be great.
on some higher end markets that have done this, because we've seen this is, and I've got some examples in Texas and also outside of Texas. Let me put some of those examples together and show you how that kind of took place.
Excellent.
Yeah. The other thing we're gonna have to do here is get creative, and I'm working with some property, or not property owners, but I'm working with some developers on getting creative right now. There's some uses in this market that, I'll just give you an example. Some banks aren't what they used to be, right? So banks don't need 5,000 square foot buildings, 3,000 square foot buildings. What it is, they might just need a small sliver of a new shopping center or something like that. So I'm working with some developers, brokers, about getting creative from that standpoint, to where we can take advantage of what's here in the market. There are a couple of banks in town that own quite a bit of space or land here that they're not even using most of it. So that's something to look at. This is one we've talked about before, but due to the rising cost of development and just being located where we're at, multi-level development's going to have to be the focus. I mean, you're already seeing that throughout the corridor here, but that's going to help. You know, maybe the condos up top are going to help pay for the retail down bottom, or vice versa. So those are some things to look at. And then one of the things that I think, and we kind of alluded to this or talked about this, but consider facade and improvement incentives, or facade improvement grants on your existing shopping centers. maybe not all of them, but maybe see if there's a fund or something that could be devoted to something like this. Again, these facade improvements, these overall improvements of the shopping centers can help improve the tenant mix. In turn, increase the rental rates for those property owners. I mean, most of your property owners that I've talked to, or most of your shopping centers owners, at the end of the day, they want to make as much money as possible on their shopping centers. So if we can help them do that, I think that's the key. And then incentives. Now, I've never really been a huge fan of incentives, having done this 15, 16 years. Once you hand out money, everybody starts asking for it. But just the state of what the economy where we're in right now, we're seeing a lot of incentives where cities, economic development organizations will provide incentives. Similar to the facade improvement grants or incentives. We've been asked about incentives by several people now, so I wanted to kind of make that recommendation, or at least make you aware of it. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to come down to timing. And I feel like we've done well at setting up and getting brokers, retailers, restaurants interested. There's a lot of them that are looking. They want to be here. But the timing just hasn't worked out on many of these any of these properties yet. I think it will happen over time. I think it's going to be a little bit longer term play. But going through that commercial exchange, continuing to stay in touch with the property owners, continuing to stay in touch with the shopping center owners. These are some of the recommendations that we have now. And like we talked about, I'll come back with some examples of other cities that have gone through this same thing.
And on the commercial exchange point, I mean, we probably need to have made some decisions on some of these other recommendations to go in and kind of kick that off, right? And say, hey, these are the parameters we're willing to invest, we're willing to buy, we're willing to, because this is our vision.
So to some extent, I don't know that you necessarily have to have that ready for the first meeting, to be honest with you. The first meeting could just be more of a meet and greet, and trying to get a feel, because there's probably some of these shopping center owners, there's probably some people that are already looking to do something or already working through some things. So maybe putting kind of a face to a name other than Aaron Farmer at the retail coach, getting them in front of other people, I think would be positive. But yes, subsequent meetings, as you talk more about, what we want to do, having some sort of plan, some sort of vision to share, just so you can get everybody on the same page, I think would be key.
Yeah, and Aaron, to add to that, I think, that's one of the things, we had a lot of spread out conversations with people during the Rollingwood task force for the city plan. So a lot of what I call disparate conversations have happened. I know personally I've talked to a lot of brokers and a lot of property owners, and I think it's kind of both. I think we need to start having meetings with folks so we understand better what the demand is, but then also what the opportunities are. Because I know for me personally, a lot of the things that I had in mind kind of going into it were dispelled when I got out and started talking to people. Like, Aaron, what you talked about kind of what I call out of town owners and people who probably don't even know they own properties is absolutely true. And even people I know who own properties said, hey, look, here's the deal. I have a property. It's old. Yeah, it's not Class A, but you know what? It's paid for, and it cash flows every month. So what incentive do I have to even mess with any sort of redevelopment when I can't necessarily, based on zoning rules and everything else, I can't see redevelopment scenario where I can get tenants back in there and basically turn a profit in a reasonable time, which you start looking at, and there's a surprising number of these properties that are out there that are owned by, either like family trusts or different groups who've obviously bought it as investment, which makes sense because if it's a property that is leased and is cash flowing, and also you can just ride, hopefully, the appreciation. There's not too much incentive to kind of, based on status quo to change things up.
So completely agree. And a couple of the conversations I had, basically the word mailbox money or the words mailbox money came up. There's several of those owners throughout here. I actually spent about an hour on the phone arguing with somebody that they actually own property here, when they actually did. But that's the kind of,
Yeah.
for several of your properties, that's what we're dealing with here. So,
Oh, yeah.
so I completely agree with you on that. But it's in those discussions, there were several that said, "Hey, bring us an offer. You know, if you bring us an offer, we'll definitely consider it." So that's really, so just agreeing with all your points there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I have a kind of a follow-up question, and, you know, to the extent that you know this off the top of your head, great. But, you know, one of the things, like look at Rolling One Sitter, putting another restaurant in there, historically a problem with parking, and I know that there's an attempt, I think, to add some parking that basically messed up the impervious cover limits, et cetera. What do you think about a scenario, or how viable is a scenario like where, you know, you have Rolling Center next to a bunch of office that after hours doesn't use their parking, putting in a parking cut and basically having neighboring property owners work a deal for overflow parking, a lot like Tumble 22
Yeah.
has down on Lake Austin
Yeah.
Boulevard with neighboring office developments.
Yeah.
Golden Acres does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tumble 22, I park on the other side and then walk down to
Exactly.
the restaurant every time. Yeah, I think that's an opportunity. I don't think the developer, the previous ownership, even tried to
Yeah.
look into any of that stuff, but this new developer, new owner, I think is willing to do that. This new owner for that property in particular is out for bid right now to do underground parking as well, which is costly here, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But looking at the potential of scraping and building, you know, two stories, or at least 2 stories, I guess, and doing underground parking, they're looking at that because the value of that property is so high, and they know what they can bring in
Right.
with new development. So they're looking at that as well.
Yeah.
Now, that's costly.
But like to kind of get to your point about some of the things we could be doing, you know, I think as RCDC, you know, particularly if we have like a group like that meets, that's one of the things that, you know, we can help kind of facilitate that sort of discussion about, hey, why don't you guys look at, you know, sharing parking, particularly after hours when office isn't utilizing it and then also, you know, obviously working with the city council and others to try to kind of get a creative.
Yeah, and that
agreement on.
happens. I mean, you see that with like Jack Allen's over in Oak
Right.
Hill, how they share with the shopping center next to Sonic. And so, I mean, those are things we need to be looking at, absolutely, going forward, because we're going to have to work best with what we have here.
Right.
I mean, you're limited. It's not where we can say, oh, we got a 2-acre restaurant, let's go build right now. That can't happen. So, yeah, so we're going to have to get creative from that standpoint.
One thing, it seems to me that an opportunity might be on the shopping center right up here on, what is the street? The one that has the Goodwill and has the cleaners in it and whatnot. The city owns some property behind that.
Right.
That could be used for parking if that were redeveloped in a way that could take advantage of that. But I think those folks are in the category you just said, that they get a check every month that's paid for, and they don't really want to engage in the troubles of redeveloping. And let's face it, folks, in case you haven't noticed, interest rates are dramatically higher now than they were a year ago. And that's gonna put a chill on some redevelopment.
Sure, absolutely.
In the short term, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking to these people, because that, it seems to me that is the primary location for a potential redevelopment in Rollingwood right now. If we could get them to get into play.
Well, and the reality with the interest rates, and I agree with you, that's happening right now, but a lot of these projects are going to be longer term projects. So we 3 years ago or 2 years ago, when we first started having this conversation, my thinking was on not a lot of them, but on many of them, it was going to be 5 to 10 years before we really see. So you're going to see some turnover quicker than others. But the reality is on a lot of these, we're looking at 5, 10 years. Even if Rolling Wood Plaza was to scrape that and start over again, we're probably looking at 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, well, and based kind of on my experience, it's times like this when, savvy developers, savvy property owners work diligently on the entitlement process.
Sure.
and getting their ducks in a row now, so when the, interest rates come down, when things change in the market, they're ready to go out of the chute, as opposed to waiting to do anything. So, I mean, now's actually a really good, in my opinion, time to start planning, start to have some of these discussions looking longer term, because, one thing about Austin is people keep on moving here, and the opportunities are going to be here. The other thing I think, that, looking at things like multi-stories, et cetera, one of the things I think we're having to contend with a little bit is the fact that, I really was always considered itself, and I've been around long enough that, at once upon a time it was the suburbs, and it's kind of becoming a quickly urbanized corridor, particularly along Bee Caves Road. And one of the things is, I think we need to have some discussions about whether or not we're going to be a drive-by, on what I think some of our neighbors out west would like to be a commuter corridor.
Sure.
Or whether we're going to be, kind of a location that people are going to slow down a little bit, stop, shop, get takeout to take home to the family, et cetera. And I think there's an opportunity to start planning on that and having those discussions.
Isn't that really rolled into the issues of Timberline, Barry? About people saying we don't want high-rise development behind our houses there, over there on Timberline? Isn't that a general point of particular sensitivity?
I mean, there's an aspect of that, yeah. I mean, that it was the corridor when you went through the whole comprehensive plan and what that looks like. I mean, there was a whole process of kind of how many stories could we go up. I think what came out of that comprehensive plan is that, and it's been a while, so it's 2-story, right?
2-story. I
And
think
they
40.
On
And they
the,
were-
on the north
Yeah.
side.
Story on the north side.
Yeah,
Yeah. We were really sensitive to that, but
and now owning property directly adjacent to that, I'm fully aware of that as well. So, but one thing, I mean, to that point, Brian, I mean, when you were talking, Aaron, and I mean, market economics should drive a lot of this, but I didn't hear you have anyone opposed our code, at least it didn't come up in your presentation, which quite honestly kind of surprised me. So is that something, I guess I went into this 2 years ago thinking that our code was more of an issue, but is that something that maybe is not as much of an issue as it, at least maybe we were led to believe?
So I think as codes say, it's with height of the building and
Yeah.
going multi-story, that comes up almost every conversation. Most every developer that we've talked to said, hey, if we're going to be able to do anything and make it work on those size of properties, we've got to be at 3 stories minimum. So that part of it does come up quite often. I didn't, because we talked about it so much last time, I didn't bring it up in this one, but
Got it.
yeah.
I mean, my personal opinion is, like, to me, like, that's not going to change. So, like, our
Yeah.
code is our code. There's after we've gone through now the past few years, I don't see any chance in hell that we would go up
Sure.
another story.
for height.
Right, correct. Yeah, and that's where that.
But
But we did talk about
yeah,
backside,
Yeah.
Yeah.
green walkways.
Yes.
We talked about that.
I'm just trying to think through of like what there's sometimes, right, we have this idea of what's going to be there, like this pristine like commercial corridor, and the reality is maybe not that. I mean,
Well-
I don't mean
It's
that maybe
gonna
it's
take time.
right, but I don't think that, quite honestly, I don't know. I mean, this is just my opinion. I don't think that 2-story limit is going to take time. I think that is
Oh, no, that's not gonna change.
that's right.
Well-
So then what becomes the reality if that, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but part of, one of the other barriers is if you say, okay, we're not going to give on height, which, community spoken, it's when you have the height limitation combined with low impervious cover
Yeah.
for commercial and also setbacks. The issue for redevelopment scenarios, they say, well, okay, we're limited height, but we can't, but we also have to have low impervious cover per your code, and we have to have the setback off of Bee Cave Road. One of the things that we looked at and talked with a lot of traffic engineers, well, I have, about the realities is the setback off of Bee Caves Road made sense at one point in Rawlingwood's history, but one of the things is if you allow development closer to the road, you move it away from residential. Plus also as a visual medium,
Right.
people slow down. But the other thing is, and that's why you see people getting more, or developers getting more creative and saying, hey, maybe we'll do underground parking, because that way we can park underground and then basically do.
Yeah.
Maximize the
stories.
usage.
The only thing that I struggle with is the scenarios where I've seen either retail over retail, two-story retail, or office over retail. It's really seemed to struggle more in a suburban kind of setting, as opposed to, you know, you go look at like, you know, South Congress redevelopment, where it makes more sense because you're adding density. And I just haven't found anyone who convinced me that basically kind of in the Rollingwood market, retail over retail, because the lack of density really is viable.
Well, I mean, there's right off of 360 where Maudie's and all those other places are. I mean, that's retail over retail and restaurant over restaurant, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Where is this now?
There's a great, out there by Davenport.
Davenport
Yeah,
Ranch.
Get out there.
Yeah, Davenport.
I stay real close to home.
And they use the slopes on one side of it, but I know that that's a center that's really struggled to have, keep tenants on the second floor of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of interest from retail bottom floor housing, upper floors. I mean, that's where most of the interest has come from, developers looking to do something here.
I remember, I believe also mixed-use retail was not something that the community was fond of in the previous, right, when we did the comprehensive plan, the retail on top, right? I mean, that was another area where it was contentious.
If they stuck with the height limits, it wasn't. It was just whether or not it's viable.
Underground parking's expensive, guys.
It's super,
Definitely.
it's super expensive. When you look at it, I mean, it's almost like, I think the last time I looked at it was like 8 to 10 times more than.
Than surface parking? Well, any structured parking is gonna be expensive, but if you have to dig down and then deal with all of the potential flooding warnings and all that sort of stuff along the creek over there, you've got additional.
Oh, yeah, you got huge engineering costs. Plus you're busting into rock.
Has anything happened with the hospital district?
So we've talked to the hospital. No plans for anything right now. In talking with them,
What is it now? I don't even know.
It's still a medical center.
it is.
Is
It's a
it just
medical.
a medical center with offices, or is it?
Yeah, a lot of medical office space there.
Yeah, I think the medical office space, and I think they do some like kind of
They
like
do.
day surgery kind of
Yeah, that's exactly right.
outpatient surgery. whatever
And
you
the
call it.
church.
And then also the church, you're talking about right here at the entrance, right?
Yeah.
So I actually had lunch with the representative for the church. They would be willing to do something with that property, but whoever purchases it or developer, whoever purchases it, they want them to find them a
Find a
space
place, yeah.
for them to go. So we looked along like past Barton Creek Mall and some other. I mean, that's not out of the
Yeah.
realm of reality, but those conversations are still.
There's,
I mean, those are our two large
It-
plots.
They
there's
are,
been
yeah.
at least three,
Yeah.
at least 3 different potential deals that
Yeah.
I know of.
I've seen site plans that look really, really awesome. But then they weren't able to, I mean, just numbers didn't make sense having to move that church. Basically, they want them to find a property and then build them a new church as well. So you got that cost.
I
on top
also,
of-
I also saw a proposal where basically it was a redevelopment, but they would keep them there.
I saw that too. Cause I mean, I don't think they need as much space as they have is
Right.
what was told to us. So I've seen the proposal to keep them there as well. I'll be honest, in the last couple of months, I haven't had much conversation on that. I'll check when I get back to the office. I'll spend some time seeing where this.
I just remember it came up
stands.
early in our in our engagement, and just didn't
Yeah.
know
Well, and
what was
those.
going on with them.
No, I'm glad you asked about that. Multiple conversations continue to happen. It's just the
I think
numbers.
Everything's kind of cooled the last few
It
years.
has.
I think everyone's kind of waiting to see how things are going to settle
Yeah,
out.
still a lot of interest, but as far as like real, like people spending money to put a site plan together, that's
Right.
pretty much cool.
That was very insightful, Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Aaron.
Anybody else have any questions or
Well, I mean, yeah, I have a couple more if that's all right.
Yeah.
Just it from our engagement and kind of the recommendations you've made so far, it almost, at least in my opinion, it sounds like we're at like not an impasse is not the right word, but we need actions from council and from others in the community at this point before we can when we can have the kind of the meet and greets sessions, but everything else takes like actual like change, things outside of our control. So, I mean, maybe this is to our body, but how do we've been talking about this for 3 years now. I know that's the point of this kind of workshop was part of that, but what is the next step, both with you, Aaron, and then also us? Like, otherwise we're kind of spinning our wheels, right? So
Let me ask
if
one
you
question
could-
though, related to your point. I have that same feeling about a lot of what was presented, but it does seem like, back to the Chinatown spot, that we're not restricted and the developer is open to, granted, I think probably there's different perspectives on whether he did complete redevelopment, which gets to your point on height. But if we were talking about, redoing the facade and doing a joint investment there, I don't know that we have any obstacles to potentially partnering with
And
with
bring
them
in like a
and
hot
getting,
dotty or a
getting,
view through and
getting
through or
something done. It's one of the first things you
Yeah.
see. I just think I didn't hear any impediments to that one piece, but I feel the same way as you on almost everything else. But you correct me if I'm wrong.
well, I mean, yes, I guess there's not an impasse if the developer wants to redo the facade or redo the buildings
And he
or
does.
make it more financially viable. Right. Well, he does, but he hasn't for years. So I guess what I'm trying to, that's my point. Like,
Is there, Barry, would there be
Sure.
a possibility of
Next
giving
thing.
the developer some additional parking out front with that? I don't know
Well,
the
this is
site well enough and the rigs
part
well
of
enough to
the
know, but if you could bring some more parking to the guy and bring some money for a facade,
yeah.
you might get something in there that would generate enough sales tax to make all this a viable investment for the RCDC.
We'd have to give on, as a city, we'd have to give on the impervious cover.
Cover.
Yeah.
limits
This is
for more
this
parking.
needs council and.
Well, is that at all?
But everything we do
viable
needs
for
council,
those of you
so.
who've been
Well, I
through
And
the-
the point of it
some
is,
stuff is
the point of
easier.
today was to like
Yeah.
really figure out, is there a viable project that's bigger than what we've done
Yeah.
before?
Right.
Sounds like there is. And so as RCDC, we discuss as a group, sort of what are the tangible next steps that we want to make and take. Remember the commercial corridor recommendations in the comprehensive plan and the money that we've set aside for those changes, really leaning into that and understanding, will that benefit what we're trying to accomplish here? Which I believe some of that is addressed a bit in that. And then to your point, I've asked Aaron the same question, like, do we continue this relationship? Is it a monthly thing? Is it a, quarterly thing that we start with? I don't know, but again, that is us as a group need to decide how we want to proceed.
So I think one thing that's going to have to be, I think, realized here, and y'all get it, I get that, but it's the whole corridor is not going to redevelop like that,
No.
right?
Mhm.
So our recommendation as a team is focus on one property,
Yeah.
focus on 2 properties at a time, and really work on those, and then the others will come. And once this property is completed, let's go here, let's go here, and then it's going to be a domino effect. People
Yeah.
are going to see, oh, look what happened to Rollingwood Plaza. Look what happened here. I think we need to
Right.
do something. So I think that's what we got to get everyone to understand, the community to understand, is it's not going to be a snap of the fingers. It's gonna take time. But if we can focus on 1 or 2 properties, I almost agree that, or I don't almost agree, I agree that Rollingwood Plaza, in my opinion, is probably the quickest and easiest.
Kind of
You've
starting
gotta-
point.
Yeah, I mean, we met with the developer
Yeah.
6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, willing to do something. Ideally, they'd like to go 3 stories, but that's not an option. So that's why they're looking at the underground parking option. So as far as a relationship with us, we'll do what, I'll be honest with you. I'll go back to the team and let them know this conversation here, and we'll make some recommendations to you. If it's, not working with us for a year or 2 until some of these things happen, we're happy to do that as well. Let me, after hearing this conversation, let me sit down with our whole team and maybe, and get you those examples that we talked about. Maybe come back with even a little
Sure.
bit, a few more recommendations on, hey, these are the 2 properties we would focus on initially.
I think that would be great.
And
I think that'd be very helpful. Go ahead.
I also really like Aaron's idea of having a exchange group.
I
To
completely
me,
agree.
especially now that, you know,
There's
kind
some
of in the
opportunity.
post-COVID world and everything else, because I can tell you just, you know, by my experience on the task force, thinking I knew a lot about, you know, what the barriers were, what the opportunities were. You know, when you sit down and start talking to people, you know, you start learning, you know, a different perspective. And so I think, you know, we can kind of talk all we want, you know, in the echo chamber of RCDC, but I think when you really kind of start
Yeah.
talking to people in the real world, and I think that's one area where Aaron and his group can really be of value to us, because, you know, I know that Aaron and I know a bunch of brokers and a bunch of people in common, but you know, I think Aaron can help facilitate and get us together with some of the people who have interest, but also some good thoughts, and kind of have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the current market. Because I think once we find, you know, either a project or an opportunity and start having some little victories,
Oh, we'll have bigger
then
ones,
you
yeah.
start having
Yep.
some momentum,
Agreed.
but also you kind of get everyone on the same page a little more.
Yeah.
And also I think there is, and I think we've experienced, there's a lot of fear of the unknown and the what if and the hypothetical, oh my gosh, this might happen. And I think if we focus on some small victories, I think we can kind of come together and start seeing some progress.
It should also solve over time some of the mailbox money problem,
Yeah.
because you start to elevate the, you know, the cost of the real estate, and all of a sudden the economics don't work as well.
Yeah.
No question.
So, Aaron, you'll come back to us with sort of some examples that Colin asked, and maybe some additional to your
Yeah.
point
And
of these are the
recommendations.
2 properties
Yeah.
to focus on.
Exactly.
Or
Before-
one property, whatever, you know, you and the team decide.
And before we got too deep into the recommendations, I wanted to hear a
Yeah.
little bit of this conversation. So I'll sit down with the team either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
We'll put our heads together and come
And
back
then
with some more
next
detail.
meeting in February.
Yeah.
And that we could, if you can't come in person, we can do virtual.
Sure.
But,
Yeah. No,
okay.
that sounds good.
That would be great. Does that sound good?
Yep.
To everybody? Okay. Thank you, Aaron, so much.
Yeah,
That's
it's good
very
seeing y'all.
helpful,
If
yeah.
y'all have got my email number, if y'all need anything, just reach out, and we'll plan on being at this next meeting also.
Thank you.
The slide deck, is that available to us somewhere?
It's on the packet, yep.
It is?
Yeah.
Awesome. Y'all have a
Thanks,
good
Aaron. Yeah, happy New
Thanks,
Year.
Aaron. That's
Thank
great.
you. Okay. So we'll close item number 3, which is the workshop and discussion with retail coach, and move on to item 4, discussion and possible action on the professional services agreement with the retail coach. I would ask that we table that
Yeah.
for now while we work through, we had it on there just in case anything came up. So we're going to table item number 4 if that's okay with everybody, right? I don't need to go through. No, okay. Item number 5, update regarding city council action on RCDC proposed items. Ashley, I believe this is you.
Yes, it is. All right, we just wanted to give a quick update on the city council action on both the park amenities project and then the new business development grant, the business welcoming grant, that's correct.
Yes.
So the park amenities, they approved a resolution in the amount of $3,000. So you'll see that next we brought back an amended resolution for the next item for you guys to approve with the $3,000 amount amended there, just to match what the city council approved last week, or last month, I guess. And then last was the business welcoming, I keep forgetting what to call that, business welcoming grant. But those, council was generally in favor of that. That one we didn't bring with a resolution and for them to approve right then. It was kind of a more, how do you feel about this? Is this a direction you're okay with RCDC going before you guys put the work in? And they were generally in favor of it.
My recollection, which surprised me somewhat, is that our legal counsel at the time said we didn't
we didn't
need
have-
a
right.
resolution in order to do that, that we had some kind of statutory authority, which
'Cause
I
it's-
haven't found and would love to find a citation to, that we could do promotional
Right.
activities up to 10% of something without having to go through the process of defining and of getting approval of a project, which would say to me that we didn't need a council approval and we could go ahead and start figuring out what we want to do with this. How do we want to identify businesses that are coming to town that might want our services of doing some flyers or doing some approvals or something of the sort? And so that's where that was
Because
left.
it's in the promotion budget, if I remember, because I was listening virtually. It's a part of our promotional budget, and it's already in there, so it's not considered a separate project.
Right, you're
Because
authorized
Do we have a
to
promotional
use,
budget?
you're authorized to use 10% of your sales tax revenue.
As
Is
a
it
part of
promotional, or
promotion.
what is the word on that?
Right, for promotional marketing,
business.
advertising,
Right.
promotion of the economic development
So
in the
it's
city.
Right. And so we've had,
$18,000.
we had projected the 150,000 in the past year, so we had 15,000. That's what we used for a retail coach this last year.
Right.
And so that's where they were paid out of. This year, I believe we projected 200,000 in sales tax,
Yeah,
and so
that's
there's
our total-
$20,000. So, right, yes, that's
So
the total
20%,
sales tax.
20,000.
20%, or yeah, 20,000,
Right.
10% of that would be able to use for that.
Mhm.
I think the only thing that would possibly trigger any kind of council resolution would be if there wasn't enough money in there and there wanted to
Right.
be a different project done, so,
Well, that
because it
sounds
falls
great.
under that.
So yeah, so we can basically
Start.
move forward
We
and
need
kind
to
of,
put the program together.
yeah,
But,
Right,
okay.
just wanted to
Well,
update on
do we
those.
feel like we have authority then to,
I mean, I would
proceed with
say,
that
I
project?
mean, I
Yeah.
believe that
Yeah.
we do.
okay?
Yeah,
It's just
All
a
right.
promotional activity. I mean, it's I
right.
don't know. We're not fun changing anything. We're just letting people know we have some businesses available.
So Barry, you
Well,
want
then
to,
Somebody needs to grab that one by the.
I'll take it.
yeah, Barry kind of started that.
Barry wants to
So
work on
Barry
that.
will own
I'd
that.
be glad to help, Barry.
Okay. Me and Brian at it again.
Real quick question, I forget the answer to this. Where the Mr. Gaddy's is, it's continues to have more walls added to it and stuff.
It looks like it's blocked in.
Yeah.
It's a real estate company,
Is
it's
that
from
what
what I
it is?
understand, right?
Okay.
How do you get in that building now? Because they did
You
block in the
skydive
entire
in.
front
I was just
and the
Skydiving.
sides.
I was just curious.
Well, looks like it's a side
They have another office over
Yeah.
on Third,
Oh, is it that den? Is that what it is?
down 2222 or
Mm.
something,
Oh,
2022.
Anyway, okay.
okay, thanks.
I'll take that. So I'll
Okay,
take
so you'll
the-
start that. And then, so number 6 is discussion and possible action on the amended resolution approving the Rollywood Park amenities and the promotion project, which we don't need it for promotion project, we need it for the Rollywood Park amenities.
Right, yes, this is only for park
So
amenities.
basically, what we took to them originally, they amended, and I know, Brian, you were there in
Do we
person.
just need then a motion to approve
The
the
amended.
Yes.
the amended
Yes.
resolution attached?
Yes.
Yes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, number 7, discussion and possible action on a resolution of the Rollywood Community Development Corporation amending the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget to identify funding for the Rollywood Park amenities and promotion project.
So this is just putting that $3,000 that you just approved via resolution
Yeah,
into your
this is-
budget.
This is just the formality
Yes.
of making the money available for
Correct.
what we just approved. So
So-
I'll move to approve the item number 7 resolution that's attached for the amending the budget.
We have a first, we have a second.
Second.
Pat, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Oh, yeah, Bobby, can you hear us? Can you vote?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Aye, can he hear us, or aye,
Did
can he
you,
vote?
Bobby, did you approve
I approve.
both? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I didn't know that was on.
Lastly is RCDC financials through November 30th of 2022.
I had a question about payable to city has expanded from a few dollars to $127,542.19. Can we have some specification as to what is in that number?
What page are you on, Brian?
I'm on page 13, about right in the middle of the page, payable to city.
It's the balance sheet of the city's financial
Balance
statement.
sheet page, okay.
The tax pool.
I
I
believe
mean,
that's,
we have adopted projects for money for the traffic, for MOPAC legal, for zoning. Is that what that is, or is there something else in there?
That's administrative.
And then we've approved 72,000 for our contribution to city overhead.
that includes the 88,000 for the administrative services agreement.
But that was
Or, well,
approved.
and I'm sorry, not
that was
88. What is
72,000.
72.
Yeah, I was gonna say it went
Yeah.
down.
70,000.
And what's the rest of it? Do you know on this balance sheet amount payable to city? Is some of it legal
You
expenses?
looking at the balance sheet?
Yes. As a-
A lot of that stuff is, from the auditors, that they book the year-end stuff. So there would be like, year-end entries that they make, and so they're on the balance sheet. And so they, every year, when the audit comes in, they make the adjustments to those entries.
But what were they adjusted? What were the
Usually
adjustments?
like for any sales tax receivables, payables, that kind of stuff.
Can we just get a detail on that? On
Sure.
what's in that 127,000?
Yeah,
I'd like to see that and take a look at it.
no problem.
It really affects then our bottom line, because if, Barry, you and I had a discussion last month
Yep.
about the fact that the bottom line on this balance sheet showed that we had 400 and some odd $1,000 to do something with. And now we're down to 336, which is still a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that would give us enough firepower to do something like the facade improvement deal if somebody wanted to do that, or whatever might be there. That's still a good bit of change, and we still have the issue about what are we gonna do with it? And
Yep.
make the city council believe that we're actually out here trying to do some good. But it's still the difference between 400 and some odd thousand and 300 and some odd thousand, I think requires a little bit of detail.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Thank you, sir.
And is that something that you can just email us all, or does that need to be presented at the next meeting?
Probably present, because
Okay,
that way I can
great.
explain whatever.
Perfect, that would be wonderful. Okay. Okay. Anything else before we close the meeting early?
No.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you
Vote
so
with
much.
your feet. In Bobby's case, it can simply hang up.